Well, good evening. From the News Radio, 1120 a.m. and 93.7 FM studios, I'm Bill Lundun. I do the wake-up call 6 a.m. to 9, Monday through Friday mornings on KPNW. We call it the wake-up call. You can just call it our little ice cream social sock op. This look at the news brought to you by Dr. Michael Bratland of Chris Dental. He's my dentist. If you call him today, there's a good chance you'll be able to see him today. You got an emergency, something like that. He is one of the only dentists that I know that actually gives you his cell phone number. He does great work. All right, here's a look at some of the stories we're following. Let's follow up on that Portland teacher strike. Now, you remember when they made the agreement that they were going to go back to work in Portland, the Portland teachers, the Portland Association of Teachers. They also agreed on makeup days for all of that time lost in November. And are they doing that? Well, not necessarily, because this week was supposed to be a makeup week. And a lot of teachers and a lot of students didn't even show up. About 9,000 Portland Public School students missed school on Monday alone, about 20% of the district's 43,000 students. They didn't even show up. The district informed families last week it would, though, excuse the absences. The 5 days starting Monday were originally slated as the first half of the 2-week winter break, but subsequently reclaimed as instructional time by the union agreement to help make up for 11 lost school days during the teacher strike. All right. So here's the thing. Here we are, middle of the week, and absences of both students and educators are expected to climb even further, stressing the school system as administrators, scramble to get enough adults in the building to keep them running smoothly. You see, that's because a lot of educators, 1,067 of them, decided, they're going to take the week off as well, even though they'd agreed to be in the classrooms. And they can't find enough substitutes. So what are they doing for the kids that, do show up? They've been filling the teachers' positions with office workers and helpers. So much for the chanting of "it's for the kids" that we heard during the strike, and the agreement that, we'd be making it up during December. Maybe not so much. So remember when the folks behind legalizing marijuana in Oregon said confidently to voters, it'll take the black market for pot and the cartels out of Oregon? Well, guess what happened? That didn't happen, and likely has made the problem even worse. So let's take a look at some recent numbers. Now, believe it or not, there are economists who track marijuana in Oregon. Why? Well, because they tax it, the legal stuff. According to the economists who track marijuana, in just the southern part of the state, down by Cave Junction, hundreds of thousands of pounds of black market weed are harvested each year, just there, and then shipped to dry states like, say, Wisconsin or South Carolina. The cannabis is grown in big plastic greenhouses that stretch for miles along steep, mossy hollows where police cruisers are pretty much, scarce. As you would expect, it's in the middle of nowhere, and Josephine County only has about 12 deputies. Josephine County Sheriff Dave Daniel says confidently, "There's no way we can keep up." It's been 9 years, going on 10, since Oregon legalized the cultivation and sale of recreational cannabis in Oregon, providing state and local governments with new tax revenues from cannabis. Grass is cheap if you're buying it legally in Oregon, and dispensaries are as commonplace as pubs in London. But that's not the only cannabis market operating in Oregon. Let's talk about black market. At the southern edge of the state, there has been a surge in illicit farming, and it's turned that area into a zone of lawlessness. Now, the southern part of Oregon is actually called the Emerald Valley. It's the Illinois Valley. In fact, the scale of illegal cannabis farming in Oregon dwarfs the legal market. Economist Bo Whitney estimates there's 1 million pounds of dried pot grown legally in Oregon just this year, and another 3.1 million pounds were grown illegally in Oregon, which most of it is being diverted across state lines. By Whitney's calculations, that means the obvious. 3 times as much weed is shipped out of the state as is sold in Oregon's licensed pot shops. For instance, we can give you an example. One giant grow was busted in Lane County just a few months ago. How did I know about that? Because it was just about a mile from our transmitter site, and it was run by a Chinese cartel. And in southern Oregon, the so-called Emerald Valley of growing in Oregon, it's much bleaker. Water diverted, makeshift dams are being built, dead salmon floating up, illegal pesticides are flowing not only into the waterways, but also into the groundwater. And of course, you have human trafficking and even murder. In the 2021 through 23 biennium, the legislature stepped up and said, hey, we're going to take care of this. Here's $6 million, Josephine County. Go take care of that problem. However, Herman Bartshager, a former state senator, now a county commissioner there in Josephine County, says it hasn't solved the problem at all. According to Bartshager, and I'll quote, "It's not gotten any better, not when we keep bumping into dead bodies." Well, 2 Oregon Republican lawmakers are pressing for a special session next month to correct what they say is a growing unfairness in how the state taxes vehicles. Yeah, good luck on that happening. Republican Senator Brian Boquist and Republican Representative Anna Scharf filed a request with legislative administrators this week that would kickstart a vote among all 90 lawmakers that will take place expected likely next week. If a majority of lawmakers in both chambers agree on a need for an emergency session, which is, shall we say, highly unlikely, probably you've got a better chance of being hit by a meteorite, lawmakers would then convene in January. Boquist and Scharf are arguing that there is a disparity in the proportion of road taxes paid by heavy trucks transporting freight as opposed to light vehicles, aka your family hoopty. The 2 classes of vehicles pay into the state's road maintenance fund. Cars do it by fuel taxes, heavy trucks by a weight mile tax, and they both pay registration fees. The Oregon Constitution says that the amount paid by the 2 types of vehicles needs to be, and I'll quote the Constitution, fair and proportionate to the costs incurred for the highway system because of each class of vehicle, which really isn't part of the case right now. According to a study conducted for the state this year by the firm Eco Northwest, heavy vehicles are expected to overpay for their share of the road costs by more than 32% in the next 2-year biennium. Light vehicles expected to underpay by 12%. What's more, heavy vehicles overpaid by a lesser amount from 2021 to 23, that according to another state study. The disparities increased partly because the state is paying for, according to the study, more bike and pedestrian-related projects because those people don't pay taxes for the stuff that benefits them. A lawsuit is causing public trails in Oregon, in particular on the Oregon coast, to completely shut down because of a really weird legal issue that could essentially upend tourism and how Oregon manages recreation in the state. So in July, Oregon's Court of Appeals ruled the city of Newport could not use a legal shield known as recreational immunity to dismiss a lawsuit from a woman who sued the city after slipping and breaking her leg crossing on a trail bridge that was slick. The state laws long protected local governments, state and landowners who open public or private land for recreation from liability if somebody gets hurt. Well, the Oregon Supreme Court refused to hear that appeal in October. So that verdict stands. In response, CIS Oregon, the largest insurance carrier for the state of Oregon and its cities and counties, declared the court had, and I'm quoting them, effectively ended recreational immunity and advised cities and counties to close trails. Now, the issue likely will come in front of the legislature in February, but who knows? They've got more things to do, like figuring out ways to try and protect ballot measure 110. Meanwhile, local governments, particularly those on the coast, really don't know what they're going to do. Now, Waldport has shut down 5 trails. Oceanside and the Port of Garibaldi have closed trail projects, and projects that were under works have basically been delayed. Most cities and Oregon State Parks departments are taking a wait-and-see approach. Local tourism officials, though, are really worried. They think that this is going to have a cascading closure of trails with the potential to essentially cripple the outdoor recreational economy here and statewide. So you think about the coast, you go over to the coast, and what do? Well, in some places, you can just park and literally just walk right down into the beach. But in others, you have to take trails. And I can think of a number of those around, for instance, south of Newport. For the time being, enjoy the coast while you can. A couple of ballot measures are collecting signatures that would put constraints on government and, in some cases, the courts. Thousands of dangerous criminals have been released early onto our streets, sometimes committing the same criminal act within hours of being arrested for their arrest. That's because the legislature basically did away with bail in Oregon and allowing judges to decide whether a criminal suspect actually should get bail. The Oregon Crime Fighting Act, which is now petition number 54, would stop the catch and release system in place that has resulted in thousands of criminal suspects being released onto the streets before trial. I think we talked about this maybe last week or the week before. A major fentanyl dealer was arrested in Portland, one whose dealing of drugs were at least believed or suspected to have caused a number of overdose deaths in the Portland area. And that arrest of him was part of a larger arrest of a record amount of fentanyl that was taken off the streets in Multnomah County. Well, he was booked, then summarily released, and then didn't show up for court. Fortunately, he was rearrested. But this points out kind of the scope of the problem. The petition, as it's written, includes those charged with motor vehicle theft, mail theft, identity theft, burglary, arson, riot, first-degree disorderly conduct, willful spread of communicable diseases, failure to report as a sex offender, and first-degree theft. That petition is in the starter phase, and it needs to get 1,000 signatures to just qualify for a ballot title. Then you have petition number 2, the public right to vote on tolling. No Oregon tolls without public permission after a public vote. The public vote on tolls petition number 4 would stop any tolling project and require a simple public vote before any tolling can proceed. This helps put actual taxpayers in charge of their own taxation. Already, politicians are looking at nearly 8 road tolls in Oregon, costing anywhere from $2 to $4 to much as $8 per toll each way. So let's say you're in the Portland area, I-205, it's going to cost you $16 a day just to take your kids to school or to get to work. Many people would be forced to pay multiple tolls just to get to work and drive home again, that in particular on I-205. And finally, we're number 2. We're number 2. Oregon now has the second highest rate of homeless people in the nation, according to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and that's unsheltered homeless people. On December 15th, the national agency unveiled part of its 2023 annual homelessness assessment report, and it shows point-in-time estimates for a single night in January earlier this year. Across the country, the report found 653,100 people, or about 20 residents out of every 10,000, were experiencing homelessness. Officials say that's the highest recorded number since they started counting back in 2007. HUD reported the number of newly homeless people grew by 25% between 2001 and 2022, while the number of people who left homelessness and found permanent housing went up 8%. The report said this rise in first-time homelessness is likely attributable to a number of factors, including but not limited to the recent changes in the housing market and the winding down of pandemic protections and programs focused on preventing evictions. Again, not limited to. In Oregon, how much did ballot measure 110 contribute? In Oregon, the researchers estimated there were about 20,142 people experiencing homelessness, and 64% of them were unsheltered, including 3,900 people with families, making Oregon the leading state for families experiencing homelessness. Grab the big foam, we're number one hands. Oregon also ranked within the top 5 states with the biggest increase in experiences of homelessness since 2007. States with the biggest difference in homelessness since the start of the pandemic, and states with large change in accompanied youth experiencing homelessness. Well, you're doing a good job, Oregon. All right, well, with that, Merry Christmas. We are, today, 4 days away? So enjoy your Christmas. Hopefully you're doing it with family and friends, and hopefully you find this a blessed time of year. With that, I'm out. Rick, get real.